Well, howdy there, folks, and welcome into today's video. So I put $100,000 into silver, and in today's video, I want to tell you why I went ahead and made that move. And I understand it's definitely a different outside-the-box move for somebody like myself, right? I'm always very heavily stocks, to a lesser extent real estate, and to even a lesser extent crypto, and then some cash, right? And so for me to put $100,000 in silver is definitely out of the ordinary, and I want to kind of go through my thesis here on why I went ahead and made this move. And I know there's going to be a lot of questions, and I want to answer all those questions. Questions are going to be, why put it in silver instead of gold? Why not put it in Bitcoin, right? Why not put it in stocks? So those different questions. So I want to try to address all those in this video here today. I've kind of thought them all through, and then we'll kind of go from there. And thank you, FTX, for sponsoring today's video. As always, if you guys want to check out FTX, get up to $100 in free crypto, check out the first link in the description. Also be pinned comment down there. So where I want to start today's video is around emergency fund. Okay, so everybody should always have an emergency fund. I don't care what your net worth is. I don't care if you've got a net worth of $1,000 or a net worth of, $1 billion. You need a like an emergency fund, right? This is something I've been doing since I was like 18, 19 years old, where essentially this is money that is like last resort money. Like this is last resort money. Like you are in a real pickle, you are in a real jam, and you need that money somehow, right? And so I've always done this, and as my wealth grew over the last 14 years, my emergency fund got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, right? Now, in terms of my emergency fund, I've had to tap into that, I would say, probably like 3 different times throughout the last 14 years. One time I remember specifically having to tap into my emergency fund was when I was starting my real estate marketing company, and I had no income at that time, and it was a struggle, and I had to spend a bunch of money on equipment, and I had to tap into the emergency fund. And so something you should rarely ever touch, but every once in a while you're going to get yourself into a jam. It happens to everybody. I don't care how financially fit you are. It's going to happen to everybody. You get yourself into a jam once in a while, and you got to tap into your emergency fund, right? Now, in terms of an emergency fund, I've always kept it 100% cash, right? Like money I could get to very easily, right? But obviously what I've noticed over time is, and I think it was Ray Dalio or somebody put this out there, and it was the honest truth. And, if you're keeping cash, it's like a melting ice cube, right? And so if I have a certain amount of money, this is not my emergency fund, but let's just use this as a hypothetical number, right? Let's say I got $1 million as my emergency fund, which I wish my emergency fund was that big. But let's say it was $1 million, right? Well, then $1 million is obviously over a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades becomes worth much less, right? What you can buy with that $1 million is, shrinks substantially over time. So this is what led me to the thought process of, okay, what if I put a portion of my emergency fund in either gold or silver, right? And we'll touch on why not gold in just a minute. And so that's what led me down this kind of rabbit hole in this path of like, let me put a portion of that money. So if I ever have to touch my emergency money, the first thing I will go ahead and touch is the cash, right? And emergency money is not like my stocks fell, so let me go use this money to buy some more stocks or something like that. Emergency money is literally for emergencies, last resort. Like you got no other choice but to tap into that money to pay bills or whatever it is, right? Which is obviously a good example that I had for my real estate marketing company situation there, right? And so that's what kind of led me down this rabbit hole, and why I put $100,000 into silver specifically is because I wanted to put a portion of my melting cash into something like silver, right? Now, if we look at the purchasing power of the US dollar over time, obviously it's gone to pretty much nothing over time, and that's natural, and that's what will continue to happen. And the reason being is the dollar is meant to kind of be destroyed over time, because every time we get into any type of financial pickle, right, let's call it that, what does the Fed go ahead and do? The Fed prints money left and right. And so next thing you know, your dollar is diluted, your dollar is worth less and less and less and less all the time. And that's just what happens, right? If we just look at since I've been on this earth, right? I was born in the United States of America in the year 1989. And since 1989, when I was born, I was brought into this world, the dollar has lost well over 50% of its purchasing power just since I've been here, okay? So the truth is, the dollar is a melting ice cube. We all know it, right? And so it's kind of like a necessary evil that we all have, which is the dollar, right? Or any euro you could put into that category as well, or any currency for that matter. That's a a fiat currency. It's a melting ice cube. So since I've been here, over 50% of the purchasing power of the US dollar has been lost, right? Now, and also since I've been here, silver has basically about doubled up in price over time, right? And so that's not like necessarily amazing, but still, just imagine you were in the year 1989 when I was born, and you had $1 million, and you could either put that $1 million, or let's not say the whole million, let's just say $500,000 of that million. You could either put that $500,000 in silver, you could have put $500,000 in, just dollars, right? Well, your dollars basically were decreased by over 50% during that time. So your $500,000 is now worth maybe $200,000, something like that, right? Meanwhile, your $500,000 in silver is now worth $1 million, right? And so silver is something that obviously over generations and decades has performed very, very well. It had two hype cycles behind it. One was right around 1980, and the other was right after the financial collapse, let's call it. And it was kind of two weird hype cycles, but for the most part, silver's been relatively stable outside of those two main hype periods, okay? Now, the next question is, why not gold, right? Which I think is a very fair question. Like, why not buy gold instead of silver? Very, very fair question, right? So if you look at what's called the gold to silver ratio, right, which is kind of like the premium, you always expect gold to trade at a premium versus whatever silver is trading at, okay? So gold's always going to trade at a premium higher than what silver's at. Now, usually, traditionally, this was anywhere from like a 10 to 20 ratio. But recently, it's gone absolutely off the charts in terms of this ratio, in terms of the premium you have to pay for gold versus silver. 40 to 60, I would call it very, very normal. And, if you go back further in history, it's actually much lower than that. But recently, we've been trading at about an 80 to 1, roughly, gold to silver ratio in terms of the premium gold's trading at versus silver, around 80 roughly, okay? Now, on a historical basis, that's insanely high, and I would call it fairly unsustainable. And so gold compared to silver right now, I don't want to call it necessarily a ripoff, but it's not a good deal if you compare those two together. Now, in terms of the mined ratio, right now we're at about 8 silver basically mined for every 1 gold, right? So conventional wisdom would tell you it should be about an 8 to 1 ratio difference instead of an 80 to 1 difference, which is absolutely insane. But obviously, gold's always going to get that extra premium because it's gold and it's not silver, right? So now, obviously, industrial applications, things like that, are much more reliant on silver than gold because gold's too expensive. So for EVs, electric vehicles, for solar panels, all those sorts of things, they're much more likely to use silver than gold. Gold's just not, you can't even consider using that in industrial applications for the most part because it's just too dang expensive. So you got to use silver. So the moral of the story is, when it comes to this, at least, when it comes to, should I put my money in gold or silver? We should get back into normal ranges, and I think silver could very much outperform gold over the coming decade or two based upon kind of where things are trading at right now. If let's say this was a different situation, let's say gold was trading maybe 20, a 20 ratio, maybe that's a different situation. Maybe I put my money in gold, but at an 80 plus, I really can't do it. I got to go silver in that sort of situation, right? The next question is, why not Bitcoin?
And sometimes late at night, I just sit up thinking, and I think about, wouldn't it be amazing, so amazing, and I know this is just a dream, but wouldn't it be amazing if there was some sort of crypto exchange that existed out there where folks could buy things like Bitcoin, Ethereum, NFTs, stuff like that, other cryptos, easily, securely, and with no fixed fees. And sometimes I think to myself, that must just be too good to be true, isn't it? Well, no, that is not just a dream. That is a reality. That is FTX US. Yes, FTX US is my official crypto partner, and that is a place that you can easily, securely buy things like Bitcoin, Ethereum, your other favorites, cryptos, NFTs, all with no fixed fees. And if you check out the pinned comment down there, there'll be to a link to sign up directly through my link, essentially. Don't forget to use my referral code, which is Holy Smokers. Yes, you heard me right. Holy smokus. And essentially you will get a free coin with your first $10 traded on there, which is pretty dang amazing. So check out pinned comment down there, sign up for FTX US. And also FTX, thank you for sponsoring today's video as always.
And I think this is a very fair question. Like, why not put that 100K in Bitcoin? Because I think the way a lot of people will look at it is, let's say this is emergency money that's supposed to be kept away for, a period of 10 years or 20 years or whatever it is, right? A lot of folks would say Bitcoin will appreciate much more substantially than silver, right? I think if you ask anybody that knows anything about finance, is silver higher or lower in 10 years from now than today? I think just about everybody would say higher, right? I think if you also ask everybody, Bitcoin higher or lower 10 years from today, I think almost everybody would say Bitcoin would be higher as well, right? And the reason being is that's the trend over time. Now, when it comes to Bitcoin, the issue with Bitcoin is, remember, Bitcoin was created in 2009, right? And so Bitcoin's entire life cycle has been obviously in Fed stimulus pump, essentially, right? Where we printed massive amounts of money. We flooded the world with QE and all those sorts of things, right? And so we don't have generations and decades to go back on and look at Bitcoin over time. Bitcoin just grew up into a major asset very recently, right? In order to be a major asset, you got to hit around $1 trillion of market cap. Bitcoin just hit that literally last year. And so we don't know what Bitcoin is going to become or not become over the next decade or two, because we've never seen Bitcoin in a high inflation environment. We've never seen Bitcoin in a situation where there's not crazy QE pumped out there. We've never seen Bitcoin, how it's going to perform when it's $1 trillion plus market cap, right? We haven't seen that yet. Well, we saw it for a very short amount of time and then it went down, obviously. But we haven't seen it for a substantial amount of time. So Bitcoin's a big wild card, right? This is why I wouldn't be surprised if Bitcoin in a few years from now is 10,000. I wouldn't be surprised if Bitcoin in a few years is 100,000 plus. It's a complete wild card. It just doesn't have that sort of long-term trajectory we can look at and we can say, this is how it performed during a deflation cycle and an inflation cycle. And it did this back then and it did this back then. You just can't go off that right now. So the way I look at Bitcoin is that's one of those things that I kind of view it the same as a stock, right? It's going to be very volatile. Hopefully you make a lot of money in it over a 5-year, 10-year span, but it's going to be very, very volatile. And I wouldn't necessarily consider it like a safe place to park money. I know some people do, and they consider it, like a store of wealth. In order to be a store of wealth, you really have to have generations and decades behind you. And so Bitcoin can maybe get to that place, but I think to put it in the respect class of a silver or gold already, I think is a little premature there. We got to let things play out a little bit here and see how this really performs over, the next 10 years and the next 20 years. And maybe it performs just as well, if not better. But, to I think rush into putting it in that same type of category is, I think, a little disingenuous to things that have been here for a long, long time. Okay. So Bitcoin, I look at that as like, that's an opportunity to hopefully grow money over a 5, 10, 15, 20 year span, not necessarily to beat inflation or not to, be better than the dollar or something like that. Right. Now, if we go back to the last time we had major inflation, right? Now we're getting to the minor reason why I put 100K in silver. The major reason is what I just shared with you there. But a minor reason is we are going through a time period, very high inflation. We can't deny that, right? Now, in terms of the inflation rate, I expect it to slow starting in 1 month from now, essentially. But with that being said, there's still going to be pretty darn high inflation, even if the growth rate is slowing. So the problem is we could be potentially in an environment where we have rather high inflation on a historical standard for potentially years, if not an entire decade. We'll have to see how all this plays out, right? And so if you go back to 1970 to 1980, this was definitely a time period where inflation was sky high, right? Sky high during that time period. And, they did a lot and they tried to bring it down and eventually they got it down, but it took a long time to get inflation down in any meaningful way, right? And so you went through this massive time period of inflation, and how did silver do in that sort of environment, right? Well, silver did absolutely incredible. Which I pulled you up here is about a chart from like 1969 to about 1981. And silver absolutely killed it. okay? Absolutely killed it. Now, I'm not expecting that to happen over the next decade or the next, even 8 years or something like that. If my 100K grows in $1 million, I'll take it. I'll be happy with that. But that's not why I'm doing this, okay? I'm doing it because I believe it's going to hold up better than $1 over a decade, 2 decades. But, there's definitely some truth to the possibility that silver could go through kind of a beast moment. That's just not why I'm in it. But we can't deny the fact that the last time we had inflation, silver did unbelievably well. And I mean unbelievably well. And we are going through the highest inflation period we've gone through since that time period I just showed you back in the 70s, in the early 80s, okay? So it's something to just consider that, the last time we had this type of time period, gold and silver did absolutely tremendous, right? Now, next question I might get is I put the 100K in SLV, and there's a big debate inside the silver community on SLV versus PSLV. So the reason I went with SLV instead of PSLV, and I know there's a lot of like conspiracy theories and maybe some truth, some false, whatever, okay, about price manipulation in the silver market and those sorts of things. Fair play, okay? And I can make, there's also manipulation in the stock market, there's manipulation in crypto, there's manipulation in everything. Even in real estate, there's manipulation. Like, you have to deal with manipulation. That's just something that goes on in every single market you possibly participate in, okay? But what we found over time is, SLV holds a lot. I want something that represents, silver in terms of like how the price performance does over time. And PSLV just does worse than SLV does in terms of trying to keep track and keep up with silver over time. This was looking over the past year or so. PSLV significantly underperforming SLV in the silver price, right? This was looking at, basically about the last decade. And you're going to notice PSLV is far off of SLV and silver, right? And so it's not really keeping up with the silver price as well as you would want it to. And so for that reason, I look at it and say, I want something that really tracks the price of silver, right? And I might buy some silver bars and things like that. I own one right now, and I might buy some more. But in terms of my main position, I really just want it in SLV for now, okay? Now, diving into the silver community, when you dive into the silver or the gold community, and the gold community might be even a little more wild than the silver community, it's wild, okay? You're going to see stuff like this: buy silver before it's too late. The world is scrambling for silver. Why, you should double your silver stack now. Get as much silver as possible. It's a crazy community, man. Silver and gold will outperform everything in 22. That might be the most fair target if you really believe that. $600, silver is like $25. $600 target for silver is coming. They plan to destroy you. So, this is when silver will hit $600. This is just, that's the silver community, right? And so, you got to understand that if you are putting money into silver or gold for that matter, there's different groups that have different agendas. My agenda is very different than those folks' agenda. Some do it for doomsday scenarios where the dollar's worth nothing and no one, can trade with anything other than silver or gold. Like, a lot of people do it for different things, right? I don't get kind of tied up into that whole thing. I'm not part, that's that own little thing. And if silver goes to 600 and my 100K becomes 2 million plus, cool. But that's not why I'm doing this, okay? My simple breakdown at the end of the day is I think it's a better store of wealth for cash over a 10, 20-year span. And once again, I'm only doing this with a portion of my emergency fund, not the entire thing, because if I tap into the emergency fund, the first thing I'd want to tap is the cash, and the last thing I'd want to tap if I ever needed to, if emergency, would be that silver position, essentially. And so as emergency money, a portion of it put in there will do better over a 10, 20-year span than the dollar, in my personal opinion. And obviously, we'll see what happens. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, once again, if you want to check out FTX, sign up for FTX and get up to $100 in free crypto. Check out first link in the description down there. It'll also be pinned comment. Much love and have a great day.